welcome back. It's Ground Zero Salem with Pat once again. Hope you enjoyed the UK punk video that I just haphazardly threw together as a larf. We're still listening to GBH though, but now I'm going to get into some 2019 stuff. Had my reservations about doing one of these just because they're all so common within the YouTube community and of course within the realm of music journalism, and I feel like a lot of the same stuff gets kind of name-checked. But regardless, I still think it was a great year for music. I still want to talk about 2019. There's some awesome stuff that I picked up this year. Big old stack of stuff, and I kind of thought about how to tackle it. And in the proud Ground Zero Salem tradition, it's going to be convoluted and arbitrary and needlessly complicated. I have a stack of my 13 records of the year, just arranged by stuff that hit me the hardest, stuff that impressed me the most, that I spun the most. There's way more than 13 records that fall under that category, all with varying degrees of how much I enjoyed them at a certain particular time. But I kind of threw a bunch of others into the pile of honorable mentions because I feel like a lot of them are probably going to be talked about ad nauseum. A few of which I haven't even gotten in my dirty little, grubby little mitts yet, like the latest Blood Incantation record. I believe Santa's going to be bringing that to me along with the new Vastum. There's a few others that I haven't even gotten yet, but I know people are going to be talking about Tomb Mold and Cerebral Rot and probably Gate Creeper, so I'm going to give those a quick mention. So I have first a stack of my top 13, because Lord knows I couldn't keep it to 10 releases of the year, and then we'll get into some honorable mentions. I'm also going to talk about demos and reissues, because that's always fun. Alright, so to kick this off, I'm going to say probably my favorite two releases. It's hard to narrow it down just to one. Not so good with ranking stuff. Everything's just kind of arbitrarily thrown together. But if I had to choose, it would be a dead heat between Ripper's Sensory Stagnation, came out this year on Dark Descent and Unspeakable Acts, and the new Wolf Brigade that I just talked about at length. Just one update back, my last collection update. The Enemy Reality, which came out on Southern Lord. Ripping Swedish hardcore with like a lot of rock and roll in it, a lot of metal, little bit of Swedish death metal, super catchy, angry, great Swedish hardcore tradition of that certain particular vocal attack that Anti-C-Mex started, not to repeat myself too much. And Ripper, Chilean, killer thrash metal stuff. Just proggy enough to keep things interesting, very, very talented bass player. Hopefully this isn't their swan song, as the bass player's apparently moved on to his new project, Suppression, but my favorite record by Ripper so far, and all their previous records have been really, really good. New one that I just got in the mail last week, finally, the new Ectoplasma White-Eyed Trance. I said up until now, my favorite Ectoplasma was the debut, Spitting Coffins. Their other records after that were nothing to sneeze at, certainly. But the first one just had this really raw, untamed kind of energy to it. They recapture it on this one, just having this great sort of late 80s death metal attack. There was always a lot of grime, like Scream Bloody Gore and early Autopsy, and maybe some Asphyx and stuff like that together as influences in this band, I feel. But on this one, they kind of tighten things up, focus the attack to involve more of a Floridian kind of razor sharp sort of riffing approach. Things are a little bit shorter and quicker than the last couple records. Cavern of Fallen Beings, I feel, is a little bit more doomy. So, great band from Greece. This came out on Caligari on cassette. They have CDs and LPs available on a couple other labels that I don't know off the top of my head. Another contender, probably neck and neck with the Ectoplasma for death metal release of the year, is this Vomit Forth Northeastern Deprivation CD that came out on Maggot Stomp this year. Maggot Stomp is the hot label right now, with a lot of people foaming at the mouth about Sanguishugabog, Fluids, a bunch of others. Great new label. It's doing something a little bit different in the death metal underground, putting out stuff that's really perverse and dirty and fucking heavy. A lot of stuff that's drawing from Mortician sound-wise as influences. Vomit Forth is something a little different. I feel like they're pulling a little bit more from maybe that as well, but also just that really violent riff attack that very early Suffocation and very early Internal Bleeding had. kind of proto-slam, if you want to call it that. If you want to be a fucking dork like me and make up such terms. To me, it's what death metal from Connecticut should sound like. It's just the sound of somebody in a fucking starter jacket cracking your skull in. Great fucking mosh parts. Heavy as fuck. Great guttural vocals. It's fucking great. Say great one more time. It's really good. It's more than adequate. It's excellent. Switching gears to a punk rock record here. Amyl and the Sniffers. Self-titled. Came out this year on Flightless Records. Australian punk rock and roll band. Kind of garagey. Raw recording. Lots of almost kind of blues-based, kind of, I wouldn't say rockabilly, but roots rock and roll kind of riff structures and stuff like that. But very up-tempo and very pissed, drawing a lot of inspiration from 70s glam. Their homegrown influence of the Sharpie bands like the Colored Balls when they went balls to the wall and really fast. Rose Tattoo, of course, maybe Bon Scott era, AC/DC, but mixed with almost sort of a more pogo punk or really aggressive punk sort of vitriol. I would love to see these folks live next time I get a chance. I know Amyl's a mad woman on stage. Check out some YouTube videos. They really put a lot of energy out there, and it's just a great fucking fist in the face. Next up, got Dreams of the Drowned 1. This was put out by my buddy John's label, Cult of Nine Records. Super interesting listen, combining maybe the more avant-garde side of 90s Norwegian BM with like a little bit more gothy post-punk kind of stuff. It was described to me as Ved Buen's End meets Killing Joke, and that's pretty close. It's got those cool kind of tribal-y sort of Killing Joke rhythms, but more like weird Norwegian black metal stuff going on. German band. I guess they've been around for a hot minute, but this is their first proper full-length in so many years. Magic Circle, third record, came out on 20 Bucks Spin, Departed Souls. I always get pretty excited when these guys put out an album. I like their previous two a lot. Journey Blind's probably still my favorite, but this record is no fucking slouch. Borrowing a little bit more from the 70s, I'd say. 70s hard rock, you know, Uriah Heep a touch, maybe Rainbow, but still bringing in all the different eras of Black Sabbath they're inspired from. Pagan Altar. Brendan Radigan is still belting it out, probably doing the best vocal performance so far of his career. Mentioning Pagan Altar, he's also singing for them currently on their touring schedule, which is awesome. So this is probably Doom Metal of the Year, Doom Metal Album of the Year for me, neck and neck with Crypt Sermon, who I'll mention in just a moment. And we got Funeral Presence, Cassius. I know this is probably going to be up there for a lot of black metal fans, I would think. It's a brilliant record. Just as despondent as it is triumphant. There's a lot of fist in the air, kind of melodic stuff going on, but a lot of like very introspective kind of vibes on this that I really dig. It's 4 songs in 40 minutes, and it feels like 20 minutes. Everything's so epic and catchy and just utterly engaging and mystifying to listen to. Great album. Critical Defiance. I don't hear this getting talked about a lot. I feel certain things get swept under the rug if they come out early in the year, and I want to say this came out in February or something of 2019. This is also Chilean thrash. Unlike Ripper, they're a lot more rooted, I'd say, in the 83 to 85 era of thrash metal. Cover art is fantastic on this, by the way. I'm always a sucker for a gas mask. Yeah, it kind of feels like, speaking of that, it kind of feels like the first Carnivore record. It kind of feels like Show No Mercy, but with just a ton more adrenaline behind it. Quite a bit more speed. The vocals are almost sort of a crossover style of just straightforward angry shouting, but with just a little bit of metal stank thrown on them. Just a little bit of that more theatric kind of intonation. Fucking great stuff. Came out on Dark Descent and Unspeakable Acts. Unspeakable Acts was the label of the year for me, hands down. They just put out so much good thrash. And speaking of good thrash, coming a little bit more from the crossover direction, we've got Enforced with At the Walls. Came out on War Records. It's 2 demos collected with 2 new songs. Everything was remixed and remastered by Arthur Rizek. features a guest appearance by Dwid Hellion on the song Skinned Alive. This is part of that scene that Power Trip kind of helped spearhead, that's kids maybe coming a little bit more from the hardcore side of things scene-wise, but kicking out some really breakdown-inspired, very heavy, fucking violent thrash metal. It seems to me like this band has a lot more in the speed department than some of their compatriots. There's a lot more, I feel like, attention played to just really fast, intense, brutal riffing. Seems like Demolition Hammer and bands of that more brutal side of thrash metal from the late 80s and early 90s is a pretty big influence, as well as probably, you know, the Cro-Mags and stuff like that seems to influence a lot of these bands. But this record is awesome. I just saw them live, and they were one of the better live bands I've seen in years. Very, very fucking good. Pretty new addition to the collection. I just mentioned this last collection update, but I'd like to talk about it a little bit more. Is this Subversive Right LP, Songs for the End Times. Came out on Bloody Master Records. Kind of funny, because I threw this on the turntable, and I had to check my needle to see if it was dirty. It definitely has that blown out, sort of like Japanese, distorted quality to it, and that's no mistake. It was recorded in Japan, but it, unlike being straightforward D-beat, it's kind of early metal punk, UK, early thrash metal crossover stuff, not unlike, you know, Broken Bones, English Dogs, the first Sacrilege demos, the very beginnings of that stuff starting to cross over. Sort of dischargy song structures, but a lot more tighter picking. Claire's vocals sound like just like an angry woman in the wilderness. It's got like a certain echoey quality to it. Oftentimes I don't like that vocal effect. It can be overdone, the punk yelling into the garbage can sort of thing, but it really works for this. All the recording stuff on this doesn't hinder the attack of the band. It kind of enriches it, which, you know, all these recording aspects were something that were prevalent at a time in the 80s because of lack of money or lack of talent from the engineers. And when bands go for a thing and go for a specific genre study type approach with their recording, they can really fuck it up, or it can be awesome. And in the case of Subversive Right and that record, this record right here, it's great. Then we got Never Ending Game, Just Another Day. Mentioned these guys a lot on the channel the past couple of months. Amanda and I talked about this, so I'll make it quick. This record rules. It's brutal, angry, brooding hardcore, bringing to mind shit like Neglect and Sheer Terror and the First Blood for Blood record, the East Coast Assault comp. Very dark, very negative, kind of the genre that would come to become Beatdown later, but before that was really a thing. Drawing a lot from those kind of like early 90s influences and just great stuff. Quick record, it's over in about 20 minutes. And Triple B put this out this year, along with a lot of other great stuff, including this record right here, Restraining Order, This World Is Too Much. Another Triple B release. Again, talked about it recently. If I could maybe speak on it a little bit more, it's perfect burly 80s style American hardcore. It's cool because it has that gnarly, gritty, negative approach and Boston hardcore style that is one of my favorites, but it has enough kind of more punk leaning, melodic, catchy stuff just in touches. I noticed the guitarist in here is wearing a Trouble shirt, a band The Trouble from Boston, who were really good for combining like maybe more like late 70s punk catchiness with like hardcore, and I'd say this band carries on that tradition quite well. But everything's super compact and to the point and effective. Brings to mind like a lot of stuff that was kind of prevalent in the early 2000s that was kind of bringing back traditional hardcore. It's escaping me right now. There's a Belgian band whose name of their album was Done With You, and it reminds me a lot of them. I'll put a caption of that. I'm just brain farting. But very, very good. Great songwriting. Fucking can't wait to see him live. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance yet. Western Mass dudes. All right, so let's get into the honorable mentions. This is mostly stuff that I feel like everybody knows. It's probably going to be on a lot of other lists. Big comeback record, or return to form record, really. This new Exhumed Horror. Short, quick songs going back to kind of how they were in the beginning. Obviously, gore and horror obsessed. Reminded me a lot of Repulsion and early Carcass, which is great. This new Tomb Mold, Planetary Clairvoyance, $20 spin. everybody's talking about this for good reason. Just impeccable songwriting, really. Great death metal. Cool little instrumental bits that sort of create a nice vibe. Gatecreeper Deserted. Really like this a lot. Mostly just the effectiveness of the riffs. Nice, simple, heavy riffs that stick with you. Create a good dynamic. Fuck the Haters. And then we got Cerebral Rot. Odious Descent into Decay. Just great, crushing, kind of Finnish inspired, just doomy death metal stuff done right, with a lot of like kind of weird solos that are kind of unsettling. Possessed, Revelations of Oblivion. First record in 30 plus years by Jeff Becerra and his new crew of people. They do a great job of honoring what Possessed started with 7 Churches onward. The recording quality is pretty modern, but not overly so, I don't feel. It's got the rototoms, and it's got that weird sort of kind of lurching riff style. A little bit of Baroque stuff going on here and there. Love it. Came out on Nuclear Blast. Crypt Sermon. Not a ton of Doom came out this year that I paid attention to. It's mostly this and that Magic Circle, and the new Saint Vitus, which I didn't pull, which is also very good. This is great epic doom metal stuff. Medieval, kind of fantasy themed, which I like a lot. There's some really cool instrumentals on there as well, harkening a lot to Candlemass and Solitude Aeternus and the like. I'm not sure if this one fell between the cracks or not. I remember people talking about it when it came out. I'm not sure if it's going to be on a lot of lists or not. This Nucleus record, which I thought was great. Entity. You know, the sci-fi theme is very hot in death metal right now, but this band, I feel, pulls it off better than most. It's definitely got this really, really weird approach to riff writing and guitar work that feels real sideways and angular and otherworldly that I dig quite a bit. Great kind of, you know, kind of stock, usual kind of growly vocals, but the music is really, really something. Definitely gives you sort of an uneasy, in space no one can hear you scream kind of vibe. And then Sadistic Ritual. This is a fucking great thrash record, Visionaire of Death. American band, can't remember where they're from exactly, might be Chicago. Just fucking violent thrash, edging up close to almost being like a death thrash kind of thing. There's just enough heavy metal melody in there to keep them firmly rooted in thrash, but super aggressive, rough vocals, really, really interesting riffs, almost kind of like sort of like a Demolition Hammer, but with a little bit more of a classic thrash kind of thing going on with it. Little less sledgehammering than that, but not by much. Then there's Dead Heat. Speaking of that kind of modern crossover scene, this band blends a lot of kind of almost like Venice sort of crossover stuff, Suicidal, Beowulf, etc., with some like modern, faster hardcore, I'd say. They almost kind of seem like the Little Brothers in style to take offense. Not to low rate them by saying something as reductive as that. It's very pissed. It's very influenced by California hardcore, but there's a few other things about it that remind me of like Crumbsuckers a little bit. Even Ludacris, that weird crossover but technical kind of thing going on. They do have that kind of Mike Muirish style here and there vocally, but there's other tricks they have up their sleeves. Some of the stuff even feels like 90s hardcore a little bit, with like that kind of moshy element, like just in touches. Very fucking cool band. This came out on Edgewood Records, and I believe they're coming out with a record on Triple B this year, so that's cool. A couple of reissues. I've been wanting to get up my hands on this Gutted record for forever. Bleed for Us to Live. Repulsive Echo did a great job with this. Did a great job with the vinyl. The music on it sounds great. I don't know if it was remixed or remastered or anything like that, but the vinyl sounds brilliant. It's got the artwork on the center labels there. Yeah, just punishing mid-paced, heavy, stompy death metal from Ohio from the mid-90s that I never really heard people talking about until a couple of years ago. I feel like Infester, they're one of these new bands that's getting, one of these old bands that's become new by getting a repress and people giving it a lot of love in terms of as a undiscovered gem. This definitely fits in that category. Another great reissue was the Psychos collection of demos put out by Radio Raheem this year. Band predating Agnostic Front slightly. Roger from AF was in the band, as was Billy Milano at different points. Raw, stripped down New York hardcore. Like a lot of New York hardcore, there was all kinds of songs about our scene and unity and that kind of stuff. Mostly 3-chord kind of stuff, but even back then, even in the very beginning, I feel like these guys are no exception to the New York rule of like, all right, let's play fast, now let's play a slow rockin' part to get people moving, you know? Even back then, I feel like the New York bands knew what they were doing with that kind of shit, and the Psychos were a great example of that. Great reissue, as always, from this label, putting in these fantastic booklets with all these great photos and all that stuff. And then a couple of demos worth mentioning for sure. Concilium. This is a local doom metal band that a few friends of mine play in. No Sanctuary. Again, if you really like Candlemass, Solitude Aeternus, stuff along those lines, this is definitely for you. Paris has a very similar vocal range and approach to Messiah Marcolin in a lot of ways. She does her own thing, you know, it's by no means like a copycat kind of deal, but I know that she's actually sang in Candlemass cover bands for like Halloween and stuff as well. She's got a hell of a voice. The music is just leaning enough in a slightly proggy direction to separate it from like typical kind of fantasy-based epic doom kind of stuff. It's very good. Then Cemeterian, relatively new death metal band from Texas. This just made it to my house a couple of days ago. I've been wanting to hear this for quite a while. It features Francisco from Die Feeble Savior. Just crushing, filthy death metal like you come to expect from the stuff that I'm into. Just well thought out, well written, well recorded, well researched, a lot of Finnish and influences as well as Grave and Rotravor, stuff like that. Songs don't overstay their welcome, the riffs are effective, very fucking good. Oh, and one last one, forgot to mention this with the reissues. This is the Remnants compilation from Laceration on Unspeakable Acts and Dark Descent. This band was around in the 2000s, probably called it a day in like 2011 or something like that. But they did two really, really good demos and then split. And again, it's that brutal, violent thrash that I like so much, in the vein of Sadist and Demolition Hammer. Very, very forceful, quickly sung, spat, growled kind of vocals. Just a lot to take in quickly, a total assault on the senses. It's really good. And that's it. That's my 2019, so I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a hell of a year. I hope the rest of yours is okay.